What happens when a beloved actor known for playing the sharp-tongued Louis Litt suddenly finds himself in a real-life confrontation that makes his on-screen battles look like child's play? Today, we're diving into one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history, when Rick Hoffman faced off against host Miranda Chen in an interview that spiraled completely out of control. This isn't just another celebrity meltdown. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can go wrong when egos clash and tempers flare. Make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this explosive moment. The morning of the interview started like any other for New York Live. Rick Hoffman was scheduled for a standard promotional appearance, something he'd done hundreds of times before. But from the moment he sat down across from host Miranda Chen, there was an undercurrent of tension that viewers could feel through their screens. Miranda opened with what seemed like a friendly greeting. "Miranda, Rick, welcome back to New York Live. It's always a pleasure having you here." Rick's response was cordial, but notably restrained. "Rick, thanks for having me, Miranda. Always interesting to be here." The first few minutes proceeded normally as they discussed his latest project, but Miranda's questioning style began to shift. She leaned forward slightly, her tone becoming more probing. "Miranda, now Rick, there's been some talk in the industry about your reputation on set. Some people describe you as, let's say, demanding. How do you respond to that?" Rick's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Rick, I think demanding is a loaded word, Miranda. I prefer thorough. When you're working on a project, especially something as complex as Suits was, you want everyone to bring their A game." Miranda didn't let it go. "Miranda, but there have been specific incidents, haven't there? Cast members who felt you crossed lines during filming." The studio audience could sense the shift in energy. Rick's posture straightened and his voice took on an edge. "Rick, Miranda, I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but I've always maintained professional relationships with my colleagues. If someone had an issue with me, they could have addressed it directly." Miranda, "Well, that's interesting," she continued, "because I spoke with someone who worked closely with you, and they painted a very different picture. They described you as volatile, unpredictable." Rick's eyes flashed. "Rick, who exactly did you speak with? Because I'd love to know who's spreading these stories." Miranda smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Miranda, you know I can't reveal my sources, Rick. But what I can tell you is that this person was very credible, very specific about incidents." "Rick, incidents," he repeated, his voice rising slightly. "What kind of incidents are we talking about here? Because this sounds like you're trying to ambush me with some gossip you picked up." The host's demeanor remained calm, but her questions became sharper. "Miranda, I'm just asking about your working style, Rick. Is it true that you once threw a script at a director?" Rick's face reddened. "Rick, that's absolutely not true. I have never in my entire career thrown anything at anyone. Where are you getting this garbage?" Miranda leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the reaction she was getting. "Miranda, so you're saying your unnamed source is lying?" "Rick, I'm saying your unnamed source either doesn't exist or has a very creative memory," Rick shot back. "And I'm starting to wonder what the real agenda is here. This was supposed to be about my new project, not some character assassination based on anonymous rumors." The tension in the studio was palpable. Crew members exchanged glances, and the audience sat in stunned silence as they watched the interview deteriorate in real time. "Miranda, Rick, I think our viewers deserve to know who they're supporting when they watch your work. If there are issues with your behavior, shouldn't that be part of the conversation?" Rick's control began to slip. "Rick, our viewers deserve to know the truth, not some manufactured drama you're cooking up for ratings. This is exactly what's wrong with this business. People like you, who think tearing someone down makes for good television." "Miranda, people like me?" Her eyebrows raised. "What exactly does that mean?" Rick realized he'd stepped into dangerous territory, but he was too angry to back down. "Rick, it means hosts who think ambush journalism is the same thing as actual reporting. You've done zero research. You're relying on anonymous sources, and you're trying to create controversy where none exists." Miranda's smile widened. "Miranda, I've done plenty of research, Rick. In fact, I have more questions about your behavior that we haven't even gotten to yet." The threat hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Rick's hands clenched into fists on the armrests of his chair. "Rick, more questions? What is this, an inquisition? I came here to talk about my work, not to be put on trial by someone who clearly has an agenda." "Miranda, my only agenda is the truth," she replied smoothly. And if you're uncomfortable with that, maybe that says something about what you're trying to hide. Rick's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Rick, I'm not hiding anything. Miranda. But I'm starting to think you are. What's really going on here, Miranda? Did someone pay you to do this? Is this some kind of hit job? The accusation electrified the studio. Miranda's composure cracked slightly. Miranda, that's a serious accusation. Rick, are you suggesting that I've been bought? Rick, I'm suggesting that this whole thing stinks, Rick replied, his voice gaining strength. Legitimate journalists don't operate this way. They don't ambush guests with anonymous sources and fishing expeditions. Miranda recovered quickly, her professional mask sliding back into place. Miranda, I'm going to give you one more chance to address these concerns professionally. Rick, your reputation in this industry is already fragile, and how you handle this moment could determine your future. The words hit Rick like a physical blow. His face went pale, then flushed deep red. Rick, my reputation is fragile? Who the hell do you think you are to threaten my career? Miranda, I'm not threatening anything, she said calmly. I'm simply pointing out that your reaction to legitimate questions might be telling viewers everything they need to know about the real Rick Hoffman. Rick stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. Rick, the real Rick Hoffman doesn't sit here and take this kind of abuse from a third-rate talk show host who thinks she's Barbara Walters. The insult landed hard. Miranda's eyes flashed with anger. And for the first time, her professional veneer completely dropped. Miranda, third-rate? At least. I don't have to hide behind fictional characters to make people like me. The studio fell dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath as Rick processed what she'd just said. His face went through a series of expressions, from shock to hurt to pure rage. Rick's hands trembled as he processed Miranda's cutting remark about hiding behind fictional characters. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely controlled fury. You want to see the real Rick Hoffman? Here he is. I've spent 20 years in this business building my reputation one role at a time, working with some of the most respected people in entertainment. And I'm not going to sit here while someone who peaked interviewing reality TV stars tries to destroy that. Miranda sensed she'd hit a nerve and doubled down. Reality TV stars, Rick? My show has won 3 Emmy nominations. I've interviewed presidents, Nobel Prize winners, Academy Award recipients. Your biggest claim to fame is playing a lawyer on a cable show. The audience gasped audibly. Rick's face went white with rage. Cable show? Suits ran for 9 seasons and launched multiple careers. We had viewers in over 100 countries. But you wouldn't know anything about building something lasting, would you? Your show's been on for what, 2 years? And already scrambling for ratings with cheap stunts like this. Miranda's professional composure completely shattered. Cheap stunts? I'm asking legitimate questions about your conduct. The fact that you can't handle basic scrutiny says everything about your character. My character? Rick's voice rose too, near shouting levels. You want to talk about character? Let's talk about a host who ambushes guests with manufactured controversy. Let's talk about someone so desperate for viral moments that she destroys someone's reputation for clicks and views. The studio was electric with tension. Production assistants frantically whispered into headsets, clearly trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let the train wreck continue. Miranda made the decision for them by pressing forward with even more aggression. Destroy your reputation? Rick, I'm not the one screaming and losing control on live television. Our viewers are watching you have a complete meltdown because I asked you about your behavior. If that's not telling, I don't know what is. Rick slammed his hand on the coffee table between them, making both their water glasses jump. This isn't a meltdown. This is me refusing to be bulldozed by someone who thinks journalism means character assassination. You haven't presented a single fact, just anonymous gossip and leading questions designed to make me look bad. Miranda leaned forward aggressively. The fact is that multiple people have described you as difficult to work with. The fact is that you're proving their point right now with this tantrum. Tantrum? Rick's laugh was harsh and bitter. This is what happens when someone with integrity refuses to play your game. You expected me to just sit here and take it, didn't you? Smile and nod while you trashed me for your entertainment. Expected you to act like a professional, Miranda shot back. Instead, you're confirming every negative thing anyone's ever said about your temper. Rick stood up fully, towering over the seated host. Professional? You want to see unprofessional? Unprofessional is ambushing a guest who came here in good faith. Unprofessional is using your platform to spread unverified gossip. Unprofessional is what you've turned this show into. Miranda wasn't backing down, despite Rick looming over her. Sit down, Rick. You're embarrassing yourself and proving my point. I'm not sitting down, Rick declared, his voice echoing through the studio. I'm not going to be part of whatever pathetic ratings grab this is supposed to be. You want a story? Here's your story. Rick Hoffman refuses to participate in hack journalism. The host tried to regain control of the situation. Rick, if you'll just calm down, we can have a rational discussion about this. Calm down. Rick's voice cracked with emotion. You just spent the last 10 minutes trying to destroy my career based on anonymous sources and gossip. And now you want me to calm down? How about this for calm? I'm done with this interview. Miranda realized she was losing her biggest story in months. Rick, wait. Don't let your emotions make this worse than it has to be. Rick turned back to face her, his expression a mixture of disgust and pity. Worse? Miranda, you've already made this as bad as it can possibly be. You've shown everyone exactly who you are and what this show has become. I actually feel sorry for your viewers. The insult stung, and Miranda's anger flared again. Feel sorry for them? They're about to see exactly what kind of person you really are, when you storm off like a spoiled child who didn't get his way. Rick's response was ice cold. What they're going to see is someone who refuses to be bullied by a host who's clearly in over her head. This isn't journalism, Miranda. This is a hit job, and I won't be part of it. Miranda made one last desperate attempt to salvage the interview. Rick, you're making a huge mistake. Walking away from this makes you look guilty of everything I've suggested. Rick paused at the edge of the set, his hand on his microphone. Guilty of what exactly? You still haven't told me what I'm supposed to have done. You've thrown around words like volatile and demanding without any specifics, any proof, any real accusations. This whole thing has been one giant fishing expedition. The proof is in how you've handled this interview, Miranda insisted. Our viewers have seen your true colors today. Rick slowly reached up and unclipped his microphone, holding it in his hand as he spoke his final words to the host. You're right about one thing. They have seen someone's true colors today. They've seen a host so desperate for controversy that she'll destroy a guest's reputation with gossip and innuendo. They've seen someone who thinks ambush journalism is the same thing as actual reporting. He set the microphone down on his chair with deliberate care. And they've seen someone who has enough self-respect to walk away when the interview stops being about his work and starts being about manufactured drama. Miranda made one final attempt to maintain her authority. Rick, you're under contract to finish this interview. You can't just leave. Rick's laugh was genuinely amused for the first time since the interview began. Contract? Miranda, I'm not your employee. I'm a guest who was invited here to discuss my projects, not to be ambushed with tabloid-level gossip. Watch me leave. The studio was dead silent as Rick walked toward the exit. Miranda, realizing her interview was falling apart in the most spectacular way possible, called after him desperately. This is going to be all over the internet in an hour. Rick, everyone's going to see this. Rick stopped and turned back one final time, his voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. Good. Let them see what happens when someone tries to turn an interview into an attack. Let them see what real integrity looks like when it's tested. With that, he turned and walked off the set, leaving Miranda sitting alone at the interview desk. The camera's still rolling, capturing every second of the most disastrous interview in New York Live's short history. Miranda sat frozen at the interview desk, her face cycling through emotions as the reality of what just happened sank in. The studio remained eerily quiet, with only the hum of cameras and equipment filling the void left by Rick's dramatic exit. For nearly 30 seconds, she said nothing, clearly struggling to process the complete destruction of what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. Finally, she turned to face the camera, her voice shaky, but attempting to maintain some semblance of professional control. Well, that was certainly unexpected. Rick Hoffman has just walked off our set after what can only be described as a complete breakdown during our interview. But the damage was already spreading beyond the studio. Social media was exploding with real-time reactions from viewers who had witnessed the entire confrontation unfold live. The show's phone lines were lighting up, and production assistants were frantically trying to manage the chaos that was erupting both inside and outside the studio. Miranda attempted to continue the show, but her confidence was clearly shattered. I want to be clear to our viewers that we were simply asking legitimate questions about Mr. Hoffman's professional conduct. questions that any responsible journalist would ask. The justification rang hollow, especially with the cameras having captured every moment of her increasingly aggressive questioning tactics. Her attempts to paint herself as the victim of Rick's supposed volatility were undermined by the footage that showed her escalating the confrontation at every turn. A production assistant appeared at the edge of the set, gesturing urgently toward Miranda. She held up a finger, trying to buy time. "We're going to take a short commercial break. And when we return, we'll have our scheduled cooking segment with Chef Marcus Williams." As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, chaos erupted on the set. The show's producer, James Rodriguez, rushed over to Miranda's desk, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and panic. "What the hell was that, Miranda? That wasn't an interview. That was a demolition job." Miranda's defensive posture kicked in immediately. "I was asking legitimate questions that our viewers deserved answers to. It's not my fault he couldn't handle basic scrutiny." James ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Basic scrutiny? You went after him like he was a war criminal. Where did those questions even come from? That wasn't in the prep notes. We discussed." The host's justifications became more desperate. "I had sources, James. People reached out to me with information about his behavior on sets. I thought our viewers had a right to know." "Sources?" James' voice rose dangerously. "What sources? We don't ambush guests based on anonymous tips. That's tabloid journalism, not what this show is supposed to be about." Miranda's composure continued to crack under the pressure. It was legitimate reporting. If Rick Hoffman has nothing to hide, why did he react so violently to simple questions? Violently? James looked at her in disbelief. "Miranda, I watched the same interview you did. He answered your questions, until you started attacking his character based on gossip. Then he defended himself and left when it became clear you weren't interested in a fair interview." The reality of the situation was becoming clearer by the minute. Phone calls were pouring in from network executives. Social media was overwhelmingly critical of Miranda's conduct, and early reports from entertainment blogs were painting Rick as the victim of an unprovoked attack. Miranda made one final attempt to justify her actions. "James, this could be huge for us. Everyone's going to be talking about this interview. The ratings for today's show are probably going to be massive." James stared at her in horror. "Ratings, Miranda? You've probably destroyed your career, and possibly our show's reputation, for ratings. Rick Hoffman is a respected actor with a 20-year career and no history of the kind of behavior you were implying. What you did wasn't journalism, it was character assassination." The weight of the disaster began to hit Miranda as she saw the disappointment and anger in her producer's eyes. "But the sources told me things, James. They said he was difficult, that he had incidents." "Who are these sources?" James demanded. "Give me names. Give me specifics. If you're going to destroy someone's reputation on live television, you better have ironclad evidence to back it up." Miranda's silence spoke volumes. After several long moments, she whispered, "It was mostly one person. Someone who claimed to work on Suits. They contacted me through social media." James closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Social media? An anonymous contact through social media? And you built an entire attack interview around that? Miranda, do you understand what you've done?" The host's voice became smaller. They seemed credible. They knew details about the show, about the cast. "Details anyone could look up on the internet," James replied harshly. "Miranda, for all we know, that was a disgruntled fan or someone with a personal grudge. You took anonymous gossip and turned it into a character assassination on live television." As the commercial break neared its end, Miranda faced the impossible task of returning to air and continuing the show as if nothing had happened. But the damage was spreading far beyond their studio. Entertainment reporters were already crafting stories about the disastrous interview, and Rick's fans were mobilizing on social media to defend him against what they saw as an unprovoked attack. James looked at his watch grimly. "We're back in 30 seconds. You need to figure out how to salvage this, because I guarantee you the network executives are already watching the footage and making decisions about this show's future." Miranda nodded weakly, but her confidence was completely shattered. As the cameras prepared to roll again, she faced the terrifying reality that she had gambled her career on anonymous gossip and lost spectacularly. The red light came on, signaling they were back on air, but Miranda knew that everything had changed. The professional reputation she had spent years building was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Welcome back to New York Live, she said, her voice lacking any of its usual authority. As I mentioned before the break, we're now joined by Chef Marcus Williams to talk about his new cookbook. But even as she attempted to move forward with the show, Miranda knew that this would be the interview that defined her career, and not in the way she had hoped. Chef Marcus Williams arrived on set completely unaware of the disaster that had just unfolded. As he settled into the guest chair, still warm from Rick's departure, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Miranda's usual confident demeanor was replaced by visible anxiety, and the studio crew seemed unusually tense. "So, Miranda, I'm excited to talk about my new cookbook," Chef Williams began enthusiastically, but he quickly noticed her distracted state. "Is everything all right?" Miranda forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine, Marcus. We just had a very intense interview with our previous guest. Let's focus on your wonderful new book." But the cooking segment felt forced and awkward. Miranda's questions lacked her usual sharpness, and she kept glancing toward the studio monitors where social media feeds were displaying an endless stream of criticism directed at her handling of the Rick Hoffman interview. Meanwhile, the story was spreading like wildfire across the internet. Video clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times per minute, with commentary from entertainment reporters, fellow actors, and industry insiders overwhelmingly supporting Rick's position. Actor Gabriel Macht, Rick's former Suits co-star, posted a statement that read, "I worked with Rick Hoffman for 9 years. He is one of the most professional, dedicated actors I've ever known. What happened on New York Live today was an ambush, not journalism." Sarah Rafferty, another Suits alumna, added her voice to the growing chorus of support. "Rick Hoffman is a gentleman and a consummate professional. Anyone who's worked with him knows that the portrayal in today's interview was completely false and unfair." The entertainment industry was rallying around Rick in a way that surprised even seasoned observers. Directors, producers, and fellow actors who had worked with him over his 20-year career began sharing their positive experiences, creating a stark contrast to the anonymous accusations Miranda had relied upon. Back in the studio, Miranda struggled through the cooking segment, her mind clearly elsewhere. When Chef Williams demonstrated a complex sauce preparation, she missed her cue to ask follow-up questions, leaving awkward silences that the experienced chef tried his best to fill with enthusiastic commentary about ingredients and techniques. James Rodriguez watched from the control room, fielding increasingly urgent phone calls from network executives who were demanding explanations for what they were calling a complete professional disaster. The network's legal department was already reviewing the footage to assess potential liability issues, and the publicity department was scrambling to develop damage control strategies. During another commercial break, James approached Miranda again, this time with even worse news. "The network wants to see us both upstairs immediately after the show ends. Miranda, they're talking about launching an internal investigation into how this interview was approved and conducted." Miranda's face went pale. "An investigation? James, I was just doing my job as a journalist. I asked tough questions." "No," James replied firmly. "You conducted an ambush based on anonymous internet gossip. There's a huge difference, and the network understands that difference even if you don't." As the show limped toward its conclusion, Miranda faced the growing realization that her career was in serious jeopardy. The entertainment blogs were already running stories with headlines like "Host Destroys Own Career," "Failed Ambush Interview," and "Rick Hoffman Walks Off After Unprofessional Attack." The show's final segment, usually a light-hearted recap of the day's highlights, became an exercise in damage control. Miranda attempted to present a neutral summary of the Rick Hoffman interview, but her words rang hollow against the backdrop of overwhelming criticism flooding social media. Earlier today, we had actor Rick Hoffman on the show to discuss his current projects. The interview became heated when we addressed some questions about his professional conduct, ultimately leading to his decision to leave the set. Even this sanitized version of events couldn't mask what viewers had witnessed with their own eyes. The comment sections of the show's social media posts were filled with viewers expressing disappointment in Miranda's conduct and support for Rick's decision to leave. As the show finally ended, Miranda sat alone at the interview desk while the crew began breaking down equipment around her. The weight of what she had done was settling in, and for the first time, she began to question whether her anonymous source had been credible at all. The industry reaction continued to grow throughout the day. Casting directors, agents, and production companies began issuing statements supporting Rick and distancing themselves from the kind of journalism they had witnessed on New York Live. The message was clear. Ambush interviews based on anonymous gossip were not acceptable in their industry. By evening, entertainment news shows were running the story as their lead segment, with media critics analyzing what had gone wrong and how such a professional disaster could have been avoided. The consensus was clear. Miranda had violated basic journalistic standards and paid the ultimate price for her ambition. The network's investigation would ultimately reveal that Miranda had indeed based her entire attack on information from a single anonymous social media contact, someone who couldn't be verified and whose claims couldn't be substantiated. The decision to proceed with such an aggressive interview strategy without proper vetting would cost not only Miranda her career, but also raised serious questions about the show's editorial standards. Rick Hoffman, meanwhile, received an outpouring of support that validated his decision to walk away from an interview that had clearly been designed to damage his reputation. His refusal to participate in what he correctly identified as character assassination became a defining moment that actually enhanced his standing in the industry. The Rick Hoffman walk-off became a case study in how quickly things can go wrong when ambition overrides ethics, when ratings become more important than truth, and when anonymous gossip is treated as legitimate journalism. It served as a stark reminder that in the age of social media and instant reactions, there are consequences for those who abuse their platforms and betray the trust placed in them by both guests and viewers. So, what do you think was the real turning point in this confrontation? Was it when Miranda first mentioned the anonymous sources? Or was the damage already done the moment she decided to turn a promotional interview into an interrogation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the moments when live television goes completely off the rails.